Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. This is just a little quick live I wanted to hop on to today and touch upon something that I feel is really significant when it comes to gaining more of an understanding over different channels of growth and expansion and how they can be kind of blocked off if we don't have the proper context for them. So, the basic tenet of this idea is there is a huge difference in the channel of intelligence of knowledge and the channel of intelligence of sentience. Our culture is predominantly a worshiper of knowledge, and yet we neglect a lot of the necessity of sentience. And I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of a breakdown of what this represents, the two definitions from my experience, and how you can apply this to kind of further accelerate your learning pathways in creative arts or in really any area of life. Once you can really anchor to these perspectives, they change so much of the way you see things, because again, we're so conditioned to really worship the idea of knowledge as the superior way of our consciousness relating to life, when I would define knowledge as the abstractions we create, and by virtue of what that represents, it's always separate from life itself. So it's a model, it's a kind of like template we create to relate to some aspect of life, but it's not usually alive. Knowledge tends to be abstract, quantifiable, more rooted in the kind of facts and logic of things. But the very fascinating thing about that is, even though we see it as like this fixed, all-seeing, supreme form of awareness, if you look at the nature of how facts come to the kind of like their ultimate form, it's always in this state of evolution. If you look at the nature of science, what we consider kind of like the scientific baseline of today is bound to be in the ground in just a couple hundred years, just because of the nature of how knowledge shifts. Knowledge is always kind of moving in this way that's connected to sentience. And sentience, in my eyes, is the foundation for knowledge, but we don't really value sentience. We kind of see it as more of a lesser domain. And because of this, we don't have the tools to actually grow into the fullness of power that is possible for us as humans. Sentience was dominant in ancient times. And that's why you get people like Aristotle and Galileo and Plato and Michelangelo, because sentience led them. They weren't so bogged down by knowledge boxes and these small little models of what the life was and what society was and what the creative arts were. So they could lead through sentience. They could expand and evolve through sentience. And sentience, as I see it, is sensitivity to the currents of life. It's every animal, every creature possesses sentience, and through that sentience, they're able to instinctively respond and dance through the evolutionary currents of life. Sentience, in my eyes, is really missing from a lot of models of growth in our current paradigm of life. We, again, place so much value on knowledge as this all-seeing instrument where we just consume as much knowledge as possible and we will be okay. But if we look at the way society is right now, with the information overload and all of this knowledge everywhere, is it really putting us in much of a better position to have so much knowledge available at our fingertips? No, it doesn't. Because knowledge isn't as this supreme God that we think it is. It's the sentience that organizes knowledge that is the foundation of power in the way we relate to our evolution, the way we relate to our life. I think a really good example of this that I personally found in my own creative practice with the way that I came into music and my musical skill and my musical ability it was through sentience. I had no knowledge, which was horribly hindering at first. And the reason why I actually felt so incompetent around like figuring out how to develop that knowledge and where to take it and kind of what channels to open up was because of the overwhelm of information. It made it so hard to see the system that I would need to actually grow. And because of that, I was very crippled for a long time in the knowledge department, but my sentience was incredibly active. I could hear music, I could channel music through my body, I could receive it with this profound sensitivity that was so easy to me that I just explored endlessly. And it was that sentience that ended up leading me to the spaces where I had the room to anchor into the knowledge. And what I have found personally, if you look at a lot of great musical cultures and musical communities, and even just like artistic communities, all of those things, it comes down to the community being this kind of bedrock for the deeper sentience of that ancient tradition to land inside of someone. And we miss so much of that in our modern times because we're like, oh, information. That's all we need. We just give them all the information they want. They'll be able to learn. They can just look it up on YouTube. But it's in a vacuum. It's missing the sensitivity to that feedback, to that kind of like model that we actually just absorb and understand and comprehend by way of experiencing, not by way of 1 + 1 is 7, 5, 8, 9. I'm going to compute and calculate because that's how brains work. But gifts, talents, powers, abilities, knowledge, strength, intelligence, divinity, it exists in the beingness. And I see you in your genius. Therefore, I have permission to now access that genius. I found that the more I tried to just isolate myself and learn music from this space of like, I'm just going to receive the knowledge. I'm just going to work virtually with the teachers. I'm just going to do these things in this little vacuum. The more I felt completely cut off from the legs of what I actually wanted to create. It was only in bringing myself into these communities of music, of the gospel community, the rock community, the classical orchestral community, that I got to be exposed to all of these different strains of sentience that were built upon years upon years upon years upon years and crafts and lineages of ancient traditions that stretched all the way back in time. It was only in feeling it with my body, with my senses, with my exposure and connection, that I was able to actually connect the dots. And all of a sudden things made sense to me that never made sense before because I was feeling it. My senses were feeling it. There is a sensual intelligence to life that we so often neglect to develop inside of ourselves because we worship the idea of knowledge. And this is the same reason why you will, crave the strategies, crave the systems, crave the roadmaps, because your mind thinks that's the answer. But in actuality, it's the exposure that you offer your body and the feeling state of your body to that reality that allows your sentience to develop the pathways in an organic way. And so I really just think I want you to actually start thinking in your body and in your mind and in your consciousness as a whole. Just start thinking, like, am I placing too much emphasis on knowledge right now? Is there a way that I can discover this solution through sentience? And what would that look like? What would I need to expose myself to? What community space? What person-to-person engagement and interaction would I need to connect these dots? Because the world isolates us, puts us in these vacuums, and makes us think that's all there is. But the reality of life can move so much faster, so much deeper, so much quicker than you've been trained to believe. When you can receive through the intelligence of sentience. The sentience is what attunes us to this feeling state of the culture, gives us this divination, gives us this ability to feel the fabric of life as it's communicating to us. But if we don't ever acknowledge sentience as a pathway of our intelligence, then we're always going to be kind of dismissing that channel, that communication and that evolution that's possible for us through this. This is the way to like superhuman power and creativity is sentience. It's the ancient way of living open and receiving, and also having this kind of intentional direction of like, I want to be that. So I'm going to put myself in the feeling space of that. I'm going to let my body feel it. I'm going to open myself to that intelligence that can only be communicated through the sensual domain. Yeah, so I just want to do a little quick one today, on and off, talk about my sentience and different types of intelligences. I'm going to check to see. I don't know if anybody would have commented. If there's any questions or anything. No? All right, good. Okay. Hi, lovelies. Thank you for watching. I hope you open that channel. Yeah, just observe lizards. Just observe lizards. That is my prescription. Observe lizards and fishes. And just think what it means to exist in a place where your mind isn't bogged down by knowledge. Because ultimately knowledge is a constricting, closing container. Sentience is a vast, open uncertainty, ready to change in a moment's notice. Knowledge takes a lot to change. It takes a lot of groundwork, legwork, fighting against tension, past, present, all these things conflicting. Sentience is perfectly uncertain, but inside of that, completely aware, completely in touch with a much higher intelligence. And that should always be what's guiding knowledge. But unfortunately, again, we've got our values all twisted in the modern times. So